Do you need a DAC? Well, chances are you already have a DAC. But what I want to talk about today is how DACs have featured in my life over the last, 20, 30 years? And then hopefully that will help you better understand what a DAC does and whether you need to go and buy an external DAC, a separate one. Along the way, we're going to meet a bunch of distractions. So I'm going to flag those as such because I just want to concentrate on keeping this as simple as possible without indulging those distractions that can derail a conversation. So we'll start with this CD player. This is the same model CD player that I owned in the mid-90s. If we put this CD inside this CD player, things happen inside the player. So there are basically two parts to a CD player. There's the section that reads the digital audio off the disc. So the laser that reads this captures that information, and then that is fed to an internal DAC. So the DAC is inside here. So if you have a CD player, you have a DAC. DAC is inside here, and the DAC converts that digital signal into analog. So we use an analog cable like this, RCA to RCA, to connect our CD player here to an integrated amplifier, which then powers loudspeakers. Now, sometime in the mid-90s, some high-end hi-fi manufacturers started developing and selling separate DACs. So that we'd still use this CD player to read the disc, but then instead of having the digital information fed to the internal DAC, it would be spat out of the SPDIF connections here, so Toslink and coax, and be fed into a separate box, which then decoded the digital to analog, and then again analog outputs into the integrated amplifier. So they would use cables like this. This is a Toslink cable. So you would use this kind of cable to connect from here into an external DAC. Now, I don't have an example of external DACs for CD players from the mid-90s because I never bought into one. In fact, I never really knew about them. In the 90s, I just had a CD player and played CDs, and that was it. And everything was the same quality. It was all CD quality. Nowadays, things have become a little bit more splintered. But we didn't just get there overnight. There were steps along the way. Now, I used a CD player with its internal DAC for many, many years until about 2002 or 3 when I learned of a company called Slim Devices. And what Slim Devices made was something called a network streamer. So it was a bit like this. This is a later version because Slim Devices was sold to Logitech in the mid-2000s. This is the last product they made. This is the Logitech Squeezebox Touch. This is a network streamer. It pulls digital audio from a server elsewhere. Later, it was able to pull music from the cloud like Tidal and Spotify. But it's the same principle, really. So it has a section that reads digital information, so from the server, from Spotify, Tidal, that kind of thing. And then inside here is an internal DAC. So if I turn it around, like the CD player, we have an analog output on the back, so these red and white RCA sockets, those are for connecting to our amplifier. And again, like the CD player, there is a Toslink and a coax socket for connecting to an external DAC, should we want one. But when I first started out with these, I was just using the DAC inside. I think this is a Burr Brown. So here comes our first distraction. Many people get hung up on the chip inside the DAC, when really the quality of sound that we hear is not just that chip, it's also the quality of the power supply that feeds that chip, and then the analog section, so just after the chip, that then spits out via the RCAs on the back here. So anyway, this has an internal DAC that I used for about a year until finally I decided that I would use an external DAC, so from the coaxial socket, and then have that do the digital to analog conversion. But this still handled the the streaming transportation, so the digital reading, if you like. Now, I don't have the external DAC that I first used with the Squeezebox Touch. Nowadays, if I was going to apply an external DAC to this, I would choose the Schiit Modi 3. It's $100. And the reason I would choose this as an external DAC is because its external analog outputs, the RCAs here, give us a better sound quality than the internal DAC's output on the Squeezebox Touch here. So in essence, this is why you buy an external DAC, because its digital to analog conversion in here, in the external DAC, is better than the digital to analog conversion in here. This is still doing the streaming portion, still pulling files from elsewhere. This is doing the decoding to send analog out to the amplifier. So this is not my original Squeezebox Touch. I bought this on eBay Germany this year. And time has not been kind to its internal DAC, hence the use of the Schiit Modi 3. But really, just to recap here, a network streamer is a bit like the CD reading portion of a CD player, with also the DAC portion inside. So it's like a CD player, but instead of reading discs, it reads network files and cloud streams, which is why we can connect this wirelessly to our network using Wi-Fi. There's an Ethernet socket on the back as well, if you want to hardwire it in. I've spoken about the coax and the TOS-Link sockets on the back. The USB socket on the back of this one was originally designed just so that you could connect a USB storage device, like a small USB key, to the back, and this would play directly from that. But some software mods that came out in about 2014 allowed that USB socket to be turned into a USB output. Now, nowadays you can't buy a Logitech Squeezebox Touch in the store, long since discontinued, and people might instead buy something like this. This is the Bluesound Node. This is also a network streamer, minus the touchscreen. And again, we have outputs, analog outputs, which tells us we have an internal DAC inside here, and we have digital outputs, coaxial TOS-Link, if we wanted to connect this to an external DAC like this and use the external DA conversion here. So this is where you're kind of getting into the world of audiophiles. This is where you become an audiophile, where you wonder, does this DAC sound better than this DAC? Now, we can spend a lot of money on a network streamer if we want to. This is the AURALiC Aries G1. There is no DAC inside this, so you have to add an external DAC. So here I've got the Schiit Modi 3. The price disparity between these two makes this kind of an unusual pairing. We would probably use a better DAC with this. But now we're sort of going up really much further into the world of audiophiles, and I really wanted to keep this more simple. So just to show you that there are high-end solutions out there, no DAC inside, just a network streamer. So like the Bluesound, but without the DAC part, super high-end. But that's another distraction. How the source, so the digital transport, the thing that reads the data streams from across the network or from the cloud, how that can influence the sound even though we're still using the same DAC. So different transports sound different, but again, that's a distraction. So let's keep it simple. Now, I didn't go from Squeezebox Touch to Bluesound Node to AURALiC high-end streamer. I actually went from the Squeezebox Touch in about 2011, I think I switched, and I went over to a MacBook like this. And this has a DAC in it. It must do because it has speakers, so analog sound comes out, but it also has a headphone socket. And a lot of people do this. A lot of people use a cable like this, so 3.5mm to RCAs to connect their laptop to their hi-fi system, which is quite reasonable. The reason I don't do that is because the DAC in here doesn't sound very good. So again, I want to use an external DAC, so I take USB out, so I tell the computer to send the audio in digital form out via USB and into, in this case, a Chord Qutest DAC. This is an expensive DAC. It sounds better than the Schiit Modi 3, so you get what you pay for. So I could use the Schiit Modi 3, but these two things don't sound the same. However, this is where we get to another one of our distractions. And for me, this is a big distraction, and that is high-res audio. People tend to talk about online, you know, this DAC and the high-res formats that it plays, and this DAC and the high-res formats that it plays. But really, even with streaming services that offer high-res audio, it's only about 5% of the catalogue is anything above CD quality. So if I had one message to tell a budding audiophile or somebody who's curious about DACs, if they're DAC curious, I would tell them, get the DAC, not because it does high res or this format or this fancy format, but because of the way it sounds, so that you can use it to improve anything you play on your laptop. So in my case, Spotify, but you could use it to improve YouTube, SoundCloud, or if you are a Tidal streamer or a Cobalt subscriber, you can use it to improve the CD quality streams that they have for pretty much everything. And then stream high res as the icing on the cake. But choose the DAC that you like because you like the way it sounds with things like Spotify, Apple Music, Mixcloud, Pandora, you know, other streaming services, the things that you listen to most often. Don't buy it for unicorn formats like 32-bit 768 kilohertz PCM or DSD 512. So let's ignore the high-res distraction and just consider a simple setup like this: USB out of a MacBook into a DAC, and then we tap its analog outputs and send those out into our amplifier. Now DACs come in all shapes and sizes. These are some of the smaller DACs that I've been using the last 5 or 6 years. So I can take the Qutest out and I can connect my laptop instead into this Concero from Resonessence Labs, or I can take that out, another Resonessence Labs DAC, go into their Herus DAC. Now this one has a headphone output like this, so I can connect headphones to this if I want to, whereas the Concero is just RCA, so this just goes straight into an amplifier or a pair of powered loudspeakers. You've seen this before probably if you follow this channel. This is the AudioQuest DragonFly Cobalt. This has a 3.5mm output. This connects directly to the body of older MacBooks, where it's USB-A. But with USB-C MacBooks, we need an adapter like this. This adapter is from iFi. So that we just go in there like that and then we connect that. And again, we can use this headphones, or we can connect to an integrated amplifier or powered speakers. So many possibilities. And all of these DACs sound different. And all of them make Spotify, SoundCloud, Tidal, Qobuz, Pandora, Mixcloud, YouTube, Google Play Music if it still exists. It makes any audio from this computer sound better than if we just used its headphone output, because they're external. And because these are designed by audio companies who just want to make a DAC that sounds good. Apple want to make a DAC that just sounds okay, that just functions. These sound much better. So this is a big DAC, this is a big piece of shit. You can see analog outputs are here, including balanced. So when you get into higher end products, you get balanced connections like you do here. You can see the USB socket down here. That's where you connect it to a computer. And you could also connect it to a streamer if you wanted to, like the AURALiC product we saw. You could connect that over well, actually you could do it over USB or coax or Toslink. There are many possibilities when you're looking at a DAC, all the way from this tiny fella. By the way, this works with a smartphone. This is designed to be portable, this is not. So functionality and form and also aesthetics, they also matter in the DACs that we choose. This is an iPhone 6s Plus. It's one of the last iPhones to still have a 3.5mm output on the bottom here. That means it has a DAC inside. When I listen to headphones here, it sounds okay. It's kind of punchy, but it's a bit flat when compared to connecting the USB Lightning C connector here, then the DragonFly Cobalt DAC here, and then taking my audio out of here. Basically, this is an external DAC for a smartphone. It's not too dissimilar in concept to the dongle that you use with smartphones nowadays, but this is just a much, much better sounding setup than just using Apple's dongle. So nowadays we find DACs in all manner of audio equipment. This is a high-end active speaker from KEF, the LS50 Wireless. You can see the DAC connections on the back here, so there's a DAC inside here. And there also must be a DAC inside here because this is a streaming loudspeaker. It can pull audio from the cloud or from across the network. And the concept is none too dissimilar to this. This is the UE Boom. Now this obviously does not sound anywhere near as good as this speaker. Obviously we would have a pair of these loudspeakers. That's its first advantage. It paints a proper stereo image compared to this. This takes its input from Bluetooth. The Bluetooth receiver then sends the digital audio to a DAC inside here, and then it's amplified out of the speakers in this tube. This is actually a bit of a modern technological marvel in my opinion, that this thing can actually sound so good given that it's a mono box, given that it's Bluetooth, and given that it's so small. However, something like this, much better. So nowadays I use all manner of devices. I use external DACs with my laptop. Sometimes I use external DACs with my smartphones. I have an LG as well as this. So I use external DACs in many different situations. I also use them in inside active speakers, as we just saw with the KEF. And sometimes I even use little Bluetooth speakers like this when I'm on vacation. The main thing is that if you get an external DAC for your laptop or for your phone, it will sound much better than the DAC inside the laptop or the phone. If you liked this video, if you didn't mind that I rambled quite a bit through a little bit of personal history, a lot of products, then please give us a like. If you appreciate that this video was shot pretty much off the cuff really, like we didn't plan it, just decided to shoot this today. So that's why it's a bit of a ramble. So if you don't mind that kind of video, then please subscribe to this channel. And as always, thank you so much for watching.